Hey everybody, welcome to Tuesday. Momo and Delilah are here with us today, and I think there's reason to have some cats, right? First of all, the reviews are for Cyberpunk 2077 is in, and it seems like the hype is real. The reviews are really, really good. If you like the fact that I don't go nuts before a game launches, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Right, Momo? I want you to give everybody a hug before you go. Okay, give me a hug. Give me a hug. I know you don't like the camera. Okay, there we go. And the reason we have Momo and the reason we have Delilah is because the fighting over Cyberpunk was, I gotta say, I've seen a lot of off-the-chain stuff in video games. For the record, I haven't played it yet. I don't know for sure, but it's not about my opinion, because I'm not the one that was part of the lunacy before the game launched. I haven't read the Polygon review, but the Kotaku work in progress review, why Kotaku has only put 30 hours into this game by now, maybe because they got the code late, because, CDPR was afraid they were going to be unfair to it, and as much as the reviewer tried to be unfair to it, so far, I don't see anything that's really a legitimate criticism. Again, I will be playing the game. You will get my reviews later on, but right now I want to talk. Yes, Delilah, you're a cutie. I want to talk about the anti-hype surrounding this game. One of the reasons the Kotaku review in progress is notable is because Kotaku, and I think this was a good call based on the controversy towards the game, had, I believe his name's Ryan McLeod, a trans man, reviewed the game, and he doesn't seem to have any problems with it yet, and he's played 30 hours, in his experience in that way, and that, of course, was the big thing about the game going, and it was transphobic. Over a preview of the character generator, Delilah, a couple of tweets. She wants me to rub her tummy. A couple of tweets and a billboard in the game. That's it. That's what made people label the game. And we have to stop doing that. Now, CDPR does have issues with some of its marketing, not necessarily factoring that kind of stuff in. But it was over the top, even by that standard. And it's funny because the defenders of CD Projekt Red have calmed down some, while its detractors have taken over the mantle of completely, totally nuts. And yes, CD Projekt Red used to have one of the most toxic fan bases in gaming. I think that with The Witcher 3 being a truly AAA title, some of that drained out. But its detractors have just all the learning, all the maturing, all the evolution the fan base engaged in, just it's like we need an equal and opposite reaction from the other side of the aisle. And the big difference, of course, is while the defenders of early CDPR games were just fans for the most part, the people who are going after this game tooth and nail, in some cases, are alleged professionals. Not all. I mean, there's I had some experience with some totally off the chain, just, randos. But the Kotaku review references the "it's just a video game" thing. And no, I'm not going to write it off as it's just a video game. Here's the thing, though. First of all, you're reviewing games. For the purposes of a game reviewer, video games should be the most important thing on the planet. But the reality is, it is just a video game. It is. I'm glad it seems to be good. I'm glad the reviews are really good. I will withhold my own judgment. You guys know I don't always agree with the reviews. But it is just a video game. Nobody will physically get sick. Nobody is, harmed. No one's livelihood is threatened unless, you stay at home, play video games instead of going to work. Though these days, people are doing that. But they are just video games and tearing people apart online, especially since how many times have we been through this? How many times have people called people every horrible, bigoted thing in the world before the game came out? I mean, with The Last of Us 2, it was, you're a horrible bigot if you don't like the game. Now I had people demanding I denounce the game before I even have played it. I have a fundamental problem with that on principle. So, of course, I got labeled transphobic. And it was just because it seems to be a lack of understanding in terms of the cyberpunk genre. I happen to be fairly familiar with that kind of thing because I'm a nerd. But the over-commodification, dehumanization, and sort of just everything is for sale, everything is sensory overload. You can be anything you want, and so more and more you lose your humanity is an inherent element of cyberpunk. Cyberpunk isn't just an aesthetic genre. The way people argue with this, but I know a guy who I think it was his PhD thesis, but he talked about how steampunk is just an aesthetic. There's really no steampunk story because they're sort of borrowed elements, mystery, action, kind of caper kind of thing from Victorian fiction with like a slightly more kind of modernized twist. But cyberpunk as a genre definitely has some elements to its stories, and that element of marketing everywhere, massive sensory overload, the sort of dehumanization, both sort of culturally and individually, that people experience. If you've seen the movie Blade Runner, there you go, right? You don't know how human other people are. It questions the very nature of humanity. And in a lot of cyberpunk stuff, it's a question of, well, if someone is organically born, does that mean they're human? If someone is not organically born, does that mean that they're not? And often at the end of these stories that start off very nihilistic, what the moral usually is humanity is in the mind, essentially. Humanity is in your hopes and dreams and fears and, your desires, and not whether you're made of meat or not, or what meat you're made of. And this is why I found the whole transphobia accusations especially strange regarding a cyberpunk game, because if they do it right, yes, there will be a lot of not so great stuff in the world, because the whole point is, if it's a cautionary tale of, if you can do anything you want to your body, as long as you have enough money, anybody that doesn't have those trappings of wealth, well, there's a huge, distinct visual difference between the very wealthy and the less wealthy because of all the augmentations. And then, of course, the people who are part of the usually corrupt system, they have a particular type of augmentation. They go for that sort of physical perfection thing. Whereas the more renegade people, they're more like, they look more robotic. They're less about looking beautiful and more about things that are functional, because they're sort of transcending that cultural rot. But you need the cultural rot so that the characters have something to rally against, eventually either affirming the human condition with all its sort of AI and cyborg components included in the human condition, or stories do also end sort of nihilistically, whereas there's no hope of competing with this system because the technology and the the difference between the rich and everybody else is just too great. You can't fight this system. I've seen both stories in sort of the cyberpunk genre, but this is intrinsic to it. So complaining about it seemed really silly to me. Now, I'm not the biggest expert on cyberpunk. There's other people who can like quote William Gibson, like the proverbial chapter and verse, right? But I know enough to know that. And it kind of disturbs me that a lot of people reviewing these games don't seem to. The nice thing is that the people who are interested and who do know, they're seeing these negative elements of reviews and going, yeah, they're slamming this game, but this makes me want to play it even more. So, okay, great, the system works. But my question is, why are people reviewing these games who don't have knowledge of genre? And that's sort of my concern. And I hate to keep picking on the Kotaku reviewer because, you know, Kotaku is a large organization and this reviewer didn't assign the game to himself. But it really seemed to me like it was more important for Kotaku to give the game to a trans man because of the controversy, who happened to like The Witcher 3, which I found kind of interesting because The Witcher 3 isn't just, you know, excuse me for a minute, I'm going to use some terms that are kind of social justice-y, but not only is The Witcher 3 intensely heteronormative, but there's no trans people. You can only play as a cisgendered straight dude. Like, I think it's cool that, you know, somebody enjoyed the game. We should all be able to enjoy games with people who aren't exactly like us, right? But I don't know why Kotaku decided that it was more important. And I say this because Stephen Totilo put up a tweet that said, you know, oh, our reviewer loved The Witcher 3, but is on Cyberpunk. Liking The Witcher 3 is no precursor to enjoying a game of a completely different type, it's first person instead of third, in a completely different aesthetic and genre. And then you read the review and you find out that the reviewer is trans as well. Like, but the reviewer doesn't show any knowledge of, you know, cyberpunk. In fact, many of the things he says indicate that he doesn't know about cyberpunk. And again, not his fault. He can't help, you know, if he doesn't have certain skills, if he hasn't had certain exposure, then, but okay, on the one hand, you'd think that if you were going to review this game, you'd brush up a little bit on the genre. So maybe there's that, but it just seemed that Kotaku in its infinite wisdom decided to assign a game to a reviewer based on the worst kind of identity politics instead of knowledge of genre. And this is why everything's so fraught. And you guys know I get upset every time an outlet like this sets somebody up from an identifiable group to take it on the chin like this. I think they sort of assume that people are going to scream no matter what. And so they get a little bit lazy in this regard. They sort of offer these people up as, you know, willing or unwilling sacrifices to the internet mobs because this is going to drive clicks or something. And that's not okay, right? Like I said, there's no reason that this you know, the reviewer, and I'm not saying the name because multiple times, because I think I said his name once, but look it up. Please don't give the reviewer a hard time. Please don't. You're going to completely miss the point of this video if you give the reviewer a hard time, right? I am railing against the cynical system, not an individual. Because like I said, you know, if Kotaku didn't go, do you know about cyberpunk? Like the genre of cyberpunk. Okay, I want you to brush up on that before you review this game, because it's a big game. They didn't do that. That's not the reviewer's fault. That is the publication and upper management's fault. Whoever's assigning stuff there. And God knows now they may be so gutted for staff that people are self-assigning games. But this is the big issue with the game review process, is most people, and I say this not as an excuse, I'm just letting you guys know what's going on. Most people review games for free. Their payment is the game. And so if you like the game, awesome. Like if you're excited to play it, if you actually want the game, great. But if you're doing it because somebody says you have to, your number came up and you're not getting paid for it. And even when you do get paid for it, unless, somebody's on salary, which I hope Kotaku does for all their complaining about unionization, but you can never know. It can be partial, right? Like sometimes, people don't get paid to do the review. They have to do it on their own time. Sometimes there are salaried employees, but reviews sometimes get farmed out to not salaried employees as sort of an audition. I don't know. I've never worked for Kotaku. I have no idea what their structure is. But there's something fishy here. And this is not going to get us where we need to go, which is everybody being able to be judged as an individual instead of some sort of marker of some sort of greater identity group. This is important everywhere in the world. The right to be an individual is the greatest sign of equality that there is. And there are a lot of people that don't feel like they have that right. One of the things I put up on Twitter recently was the idea that, I'm hearing from a lot of feedback, a lot of stuff from white straight guys that they just feel like they're an inherent villain no matter what they do. And they're tired of being dehumanized by people who single them out based on, race and gender and sexual orientation, all that stuff they've been told not to do. And that's a valid point. Now, I will say there's a difference between somebody saying like, look, you've never experienced this. You can't relate to it, right? And sometimes that is because of race. Like, just because I grew up in, a majority minority neighborhood, that means that, by the time I was in the 12th grade, I was the only white kid in some of my classes. That doesn't mean I know what it means to be black or brown or Asian. I observed. I saw it happen to other people. I cannot speak to what it feels like from the inside. I only know how awful it felt to observe and know it was wrong and feel incredibly helpless to do anything about it. That's not the same as the feeling of being the direct target, right? It's not the same. But that does not give people the right to go beyond that. It's one thing to say, will you please listen and listen to what I'm telling you. Don't talk over me regarding an experience that you have no experience with. We talk a lot about merit in gaming, and this one seems to go out the window quite a bit. You can have an opinion on a subject. Just don't tell someone that their comments on an experience that you have never experienced are wrong. Hopefully that makes sense. Why shouldn't you do that? Well, because you have no idea whether it's right or wrong. You've never experienced it, right? If it's not, you don't know, you don't have to know how a car works to drive a car. But if you've never driven a car, you can't speak about the experience of driving a car, okay? But we all know that this stuff goes beyond that. We all know that people are pressured to put, pronouns in their bio without them understanding the issue, and it's sort of a bullying tactic. It's not, if you put pronouns in your bio to normalize it and you just did it because you thought it was a cool thing to do, that's awesome. I'm talking about like the Gina Carano stuff that seemed to cause her to go a bit off the deep end, which is unfortunate, because if it makes somebody that high profile crack, imagine what it's doing to regular schmo, right? I had a very unpleasant experience with somebody who had a complete meltdown over a fight over a video game character. Like, complete break, wasn't listening to a thing I was saying, just exploding in venom and misery and referring to various other groups that weren't right. Mara's going through life on easy mode. And, you know, it just was... I got it. Unfortunately, it did seem to have something to do with the fact that I was female. Unfortunately, however, again, I can't be sure that it wasn't just bad timing and that, you know, there's a difference between somebody actually singling somebody out that way and somebody, once they're mad or once they're hurt, they go after that. Even, you know, it wasn't relevant 5 seconds before they snapped, and now they just say anything they possibly can to hurt somebody. And this guy, the reason I decided to talk about this particular issue with people just being raw is because this one guy who, he's admitted he's a troll. He's admitted he's an edgelord on purpose. Even he said, do you find people are just like really, I forget the word he used, but basically irritable lately? And when somebody who's, you know, notably trollish is making this observation, shit's getting real. And yeah, okay, part of it for some people is COVID. People are having trouble dealing with isolation. I guess I consider myself lucky that I've been so damn busy. And yeah, I'm climbing the walls, but it's not because of COVID. It's because I can do nothing but work, and play some video games for work. So I'm aware of stuff and then work some more. And it's very different when you're playing a game for fun and playing a game for research. Just saying. But you know, that's no excuse for melting down and taking it out on other people. Now, of course, if somebody melts down, they don't have the same level of culpability as, you know, somebody who's not melting down, right? That's obvious. And that's why I don't think it's responsible now to stoke these sorts of tensions and these, like, don't poke these wounds. Not until things go back to normal. And I know it's going to fall on deaf ears. I know that there are, you know, these gaming sites are probably just barely hanging on financially. So they're going to bait because enragement is engagement. And it's impossible to avoid because, I mean, I stumble upon these things on Twitter, right? And they're like, well, quit Twitter. Well, I can't. I need it for work, right? It's the only tool I have to promote my stuff, because these exact same outlets like Kotaku are, you know, too busy taking care of their kids to cover my stuff. True story. Guy said that to me. Yeah. And the reason I point out that he's a guy, see, there's an example, is because that's something, guys, you may not be aware of this, that women are told never do professionally. You will get mommy tracked. You will be passed over for promotion because they think you're not serious enough about your job. Your priority isn't your work. Your priority shouldn't only be your work. There's a lovely article. I tweeted it. If I remember, I'll put a link in this description box. I'm still having upload issues, but a lovely article that Kotaku did about Bastion and how they achieve no crunch and how they achieve very good employee retention, even though they're a fairly small company. Very much worth a read. Though the company seems lovely, a couple of people there don't like me very much for some reason, but the company seems lovely, but the article didn't do as deep a dive into the finances of it as I'd like to see, because that's really what it comes down to, right? Do you have enough money to give people vacations and this, that, and the next thing? But I mean, it's impossible to be at all plugged into the world right now without realizing that people are struggling. And it's very hard to give a damn about anyone else when you feel like the world doesn't care about you. What I will say is there probably are... In fact, I will say, if you're a part of this community, I guarantee you that there are more people who give a shit than you think. This is a really good group for that. So before you decide to blow it up because you think nobody cares, reach out and tell somebody that seems decent that you're not doing well before you lose it, because you're going to get a much better hearing if, you're not accusing people of things falsely and swearing at them and calling them every name in the book because you're having some sort of breakdown. Reach out and it's not about self-care, because let's face it, that's bullshit when you're down too low. It's about having the strength and having the bravery to let others be able to be there for you. Let other people care about you. You do have to let people care. That's something that they don't tell a lot of people, is all this toughness and be independent and, stick to your guns and all that stuff. You can't do that forever. What you end up doing is pushing people away, because the minute somebody seems to give a shit, it gets so scary. A lot of people sabotage the relationship. They are so sure that they will be rejected that they blow it up, not always consciously, but definitely as a reaction, so they can control, when the severing happens. They didn't reject me, I rejected them, that sort of thing. But then it turns around, well, I rejected them because they rejected me. And it's just this shame spiral. And a lot of you aren't going to believe me. And there's plenty of people who have called me a hypocrite in the last little bit, because they think, for whatever reason, that having empathy means that you can never disagree with someone and you have to eat everyone's shit. It's not what empathy means at all. Having weak personal boundaries isn't empathy. It's codependency. A mature person is like, I totally get your feelings. These behaviors I cannot accept. That's treating you like a grown-up. Unfortunately, a lot of people in gaming have never been treated like a grown-up. Certainly not by the people around them, because they have some identifiable condition that they get at a certain, young age, and the parents are not great about it. And, because so many parents want their perfect trophy kid, that a kid gets branded. And they're neglected and coddled, in one measure or another their entire life. And they never actually get the dignity of being treated like a grown-up. And there's really nothing you can do about that except treat people like grown-ups. And some people will adapt and some people won't. But in that case, the only thing you can give someone else is a chance. You can't do it for them, and you can't let them drag you down with them. And, somebody who's just a viewer said, life's just too short to be surrounded by people like that. And I know he's got some issues that take up a lot, with family, that take up a lot of his emotional energy. And so, he had to put on the big boy pants, and he had to grow up in that regard. And unfortunately, if somebody's not as far along as you are in terms of maturity, they're not going to get that. I think everybody who has matured has a period where you have to leave the people who, got stuck somewhere, be it trauma, be it emotional laziness. The two things look very similar, unfortunately, externally. But you have to let that go. And I still maintain, especially going into the holidays, I want to focus on positive stuff. I don't want to focus on this negative stuff. So what do you guys want to do? I will tell you right now, the week of Christmas, like Christmas to New Year's, it's all going to be feedback. Like, hello, Scouty. I'm just going to start, taking comments, and I'm just going to read feedback for videos so you guys get a say. That seems to go really, really well. Some of the content in this video was because people asked me to talk about it. But is there anything else? Like, if you guys find me defending you, affirming, and if you just sort of, hi, Scouty, if you want me to point some of this stuff out because you feel better that somebody else is saying it, awesome. At least there's that positivity. But please let me know, right, Scouty? Scouty wants love. Okay, you know what? You know what's kind of like love, Scouts? You can buy cat food. Money. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LanaK. That was a terrible segue. Thanks for watching.